I was born alone. That is how it begins for us, a drifting speck in the vast blue dark. No mother's arms, no name, only the sea and the hunger and the constant motion. I didn't cry. There was no one to hear me. I didn't call out. There was no voice. The ocean was my cradle, my captor, my only companion. The current carried me like a lost thought, and I floated because I had no choice. I was smaller than a grain of rice, softer than breath, and so fragile that the sea could have swallowed me without even knowing I was there. But I didn't vanish. I became. In the early days, I learned by instinct. No one taught me. There were no parents, no siblings, no tribe. My teachers were shadows and shapes, predators darting like knives, prey flickering like dreams, coral that offered both refuge and death. I survived because I adapted. My skin changed colors before I understood what color was. My arms curled around pebbles and shells, testing the world with 1,000 taste buds, touching everything as if I might absorb its meaning. I didn't know what I was. I only knew I wasn't allowed to be still. Not yet. You think of intelligence as a thing tied to speech or structure, but mine lives in silence, in fluid decisions, in camouflage and escape. I learned to vanish before I learned to fight. I became sand. I became rock. I became light, pulsing with mimicry and secrets. My mind grew in the shadows, a quiet, watching thing. Not loud, not proud, but deep. In that quiet, I became many creatures before I ever became myself. A fish, a reef, a ripple, always something else, never simply me. There is a loneliness to that, though you may not see it. When you are always pretending, always changing to fit your surroundings, there is no time to ask who you are beneath the disguise. I lived that way for what felt like lifetimes, hunting, hiding, surviving. My arms grew long and skillful. My suckers memorized every texture, slippery, gritty, sharp. My body became a language I never stopped speaking, even when no one was listening. I learned to open jars. I learned to solve puzzles left by the sea, how to pry open clams, how to slip through gaps no larger than an eye, how to wait without being noticed. You may call that clever. I call it necessary. Survival is the mother of all invention. And for us, soft, short-lived, solitary, it is the only law that matters. You look at me and see a mystery, alien, strange, but I have always been here, longer than your species, longer than your cities, longer than your gods. My kind watched your ancestors crawl from the ocean. We watched you stand upright, build fire, shape tools, and still we stayed in the deep. Not because we couldn't change, but because we already had. And yet, for all our ancient knowing, for all our brilliance, our story ends not in glory, but in surrender. You do not expect that. You imagine intelligence seeks domination, legacy, triumph. But I am not made to conquer. I am made to give, to disappear so that something else might begin. It begins with a search, not for food, not for shelter, but for the other, the one. After a lifetime of silence and solitude, something stirs. Not instinct, not just biology. Something like longing. A call I didn't know I could answer. A pull that moved through the water like music too low to hear, but too powerful to ignore. I followed it, unsure if it was real. Then I saw him. He floated in the current, arms unfurled like a dancer caught mid-motion. He didn't come toward me, not at first. He waited, letting me see him, letting me choose. I shimmered with uncertainty. My skin rippled through 100 colors. I didn't mean to. My body spoke what I couldn't name. Curiosity, fear, wonder. Slowly I approached. I kept low, cautious. But he didn't retreat. When I reached out, he met me halfway. Our arms touched. Not like a strike, not like a trap, but like a question. And in that question, I found an answer. We wrapped around one another. Not tightly, not possessively, but completely. Like waves folding into each other, becoming indistinguishable. He was warm, slower than I expected, gentle. We moved in spirals, not toward anything, just with each other. Like the ocean had paused to let us be still together. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The language was in the tension of limbs, the rhythm of breath, the trust in stillness. I had never been so vulnerable. I had also never been so calm. I did not know then that it would be the last peace I would feel, that this one moment, this one closeness, would be the hinge on which everything turned, that I would give everything for it, and in doing so vanish into a new kind of silence. He left quietly as he had come. No parting word, no final gesture, just the slow uncurling of his limbs, the soft pulse of his body drifting away into the dark. I watched him go, not with sorrow, but with stillness, because that was the way of our kind. Love, if you can call it that, was not meant to linger. It came like a wave and receded just the same, leaving behind a changed shoreline, unmarked but never the same. When he was gone, I didn't move. I curled into myself, arms folded inward like petals folding in sleep. But I didn't sleep. I felt something shift inside me. Not pain, not quite, but weight, purpose, a slowing of breath, a deep turning inward. Something had been set into motion that could not be undone. I returned to my den, a hollow in the rocks lined with broken shells and scattered coral dust. It was small, dark, barely enough to contain my body now grown heavy with new purpose. I did not leave again. I did not need to, because inside me life had begun. Hundreds of tiny eggs formed and swelled. They were not yet visible to the world, but I felt them, each one a glimmer, a whisper of the future, 1,000 little pulses waiting to become something more. I began to clean the chamber ceiling where I would place them. I chose the smoothest stone, the safest crevice. My arms, once nimble and wild, became gentle brushes. I laid the eggs with care, each one suspended like a drop of moonlight. They clung to the rock, translucent and still, and I watched them with a reverence I had never known before. My breath fanned them constantly, a soft current that kept them alive. I no longer hunted. I no longer fed. The world outside the den fell away. I was no longer of it. I began to wither, not suddenly but gradually, as if a tide within me was retreating. My color faded. My skin grew dull and slack. My arms, once strong and curious, now moved only to tend the eggs. I did not notice the hunger at first, only the hollowing, the narrowing of focus. All that mattered now was the tiny lives suspended above me. I counted them endlessly, even though I had no numbers. I knew them by pattern, by shape, by breath. If one fell, I lifted it gently. If one darkened, I mourned it silently. The world became the size of this den. The rhythm of the ocean outside was muffled. I could no longer feel its moods or movements. But I did not fear the narrowing. I welcomed it, because within that narrowing was devotion. My body was failing, but my purpose had never been clearer. There are no witnesses for this kind of love, no songs, no applause, only the soft pulse of my own body and the quieter pulse of those who would replace me. That is the truth of our kind. We are born alone. We live unseen, and we die watching the future swim away from us. I did not sleep. My eyes remained fixed on the eggs. I no longer blinked. My body became stone, my thoughts slow tides. When fish swam past the den, I did not chase them. When crabs wandered near, I did not strike. I had no hunger. I had already given everything I had, and yet I remained. Because the eggs were not ready, because I still had breath to give them, because I had promised, not with words, but with the stillness of my body and the beating of my last strength. I promised to see them through. There is a wordless beauty in dying with purpose, in knowing that every ache in your limbs is building something new, that each slow breath fans a life that will one day open its eyes to the ocean and know nothing of you, but owe everything to your fading presence. That is what I held on to as my vision blurred, as my arms trembled from effort, as my mind grew quiet, like a cave emptying of light. One morning, though I no longer knew the meaning of morning, I saw movement, not from the sea beyond the den, but from the eggs themselves. One by one, they began to stir. Tiny flickers, as if the stars had come down to shiver in my cave. My heart, what little remained of it, tightened in wonder. They were hatching. For weeks, I had given them every breath, every beat of my fading rhythm. And now they responded, not with sound, but with life. They pushed against their delicate membranes, wriggling like newborn thoughts. Some struggled. Some slipped free like silk unraveling. Some didn't move at all. But I did not interfere. I had no strength left. And even if I did, this was not my part to play. They came into the world as I had, alone, small, unclaimed. Tiny octopuses, barely the size of my eye. Perfect. They pulsed gently in the water, already curious, already sensing. They had no names, no knowledge of who I was or what I had done for them. But they lived, and that was enough. One by one, they drifted upward, out of the cave, into the open sea. My breath caught as the last one passed me, not because I wished to follow, but because I wished to remember. Every movement etched itself into my mind like soft carvings in sand. I wanted to hold on to the feeling, not of pride, not even of joy, but of something quieter, a quiet release, a kind of surrender that feels like truth. They would never know me. That's how it works for us. We give life, and then we vanish from it. There are no mothers in our stories, only beginnings that are never witnessed again. And still, I watched, until the cave was empty once more, until there was no movement, no purpose, no reason to stay. I did not eat. I did not move. My arms curled gently around the edges of the cave, as if cradling something that was no longer there. I closed my eyes, though I had not blinked in days. The light beyond the entrance shimmered faintly, like a memory just beyond reach. This was not a death of fear, not a violent end. It was a fading, like fog retreating from the sun, like the tide pulling back one final time. My body, worn and silent, became part of the den, a final shell among shells. My breath slowed, then stopped. There was no pain, only stillness, only quiet. And in that quiet I did not mourn, because mourning requires regret, and I had none. I had danced once. I had loved once. I had given everything for the chance that something might live beyond me. And it had. I was born to die after just one kiss. That is the truth of my kind. But oh, what a kiss it was. A moment of warmth in a cold ocean. A memory that lived even if I did not. And though my name was never spoken, and my children will never return to this cave, I leave something behind. Not a legacy, but a pulse. A heartbeat buried in the current. Because love, even brief, even silent, is still love. The ocean in its vastness did not notice my passing. No trumpet sounded, no ripple marked the moment my body gave in. The world outside my den carried on, currents shifting, predators circling, the reef breathing in its ancient rhythm. Life continued without me, and that too is how it has always been. I was not meant to last. None of us are. Our time is short by design, measured not in years but in choices, in gestures, in single moments of complete giving. And yet, within that brief existence, something timeless occurred. I loved, I gave, I became more than survival. I became purpose. Above me, the young drifted into the open sea. They did not know they were being watched by the last breath of what birthed them. They did not know the cave held the fading outline of a mother they would never remember. But they swam, and because of that, I knew I had done enough. Perhaps one of them will find their own dance, their own brief moment of closeness in the endless blue. Perhaps they will feel, even if they do not understand, the echo of this story, mine, rising up from some buried place inside them. The memory of tenderness passed down through flesh, not words. Or perhaps they won't. Perhaps they will live and die without ever knowing that they were loved from the first stir of life. But even then, that love will not be wasted, because love does not ask to be remembered. It only asks to be given. This is what the world so often misses, that the truest acts of love are quiet, invisible, sacrificial. The kind that leaves no trace but life itself. You see my kind in documentaries, odd, brilliant, tragic. You marvel at our minds, our tricks, our camouflage. You say, what a strange creature, as though we are curiosities and nothing more. But we are not strange. We are simply brief, and in that brevity, we carry a lesson you rarely learn, that some of the most intelligent lives do not seek power. They seek peace. They do not hoard. They give. They do not conquer. They create. You will not find monuments to us in the sea. No statues of our greatness, no carvings to mark our deaths, only empty dens, only silence, and the possibility that something beautiful now swims where we once faded. I do not regret my story. Though it ended as it must, I would live it again for that one dance, that one touch, that one kiss that made everything else fall away. Because in that kiss, I became more than alone, more than strange, more than soft, short-lived, and silent. I became the bridge between nothing and something, between absence and existence, between death and life. And now if there is anything left of me, beyond the softness, beyond the shell, beyond the slowing heart, it is this, a quiet wish that someone, somewhere, might remember that I was here. Not for glory, not for recognition, but for truth. That even the most fleeting life can carry weight. That even the smallest heart, especially one that never beats, can still hold love. I was born with no bones, no voice, no heart in the way you understand it. But I felt. Oh, how I felt. The chill of water moving over my skin, the thrill of the hunt, the pulse of fear, the ache of watching beauty disappear just as I reach for it, the gentle panic of knowing that the moment you need to last forever is already fading. I lived in silence, but not in emptiness. My thoughts were many, not in words, but in colors, in pressure, in rhythm, in change. My skin told my stories in ripples and pulses, flashes and shadows. Every hue I flashed carried a message. Stay away, come closer. I am ready. I am afraid. I am still here. And I was here, briefly, entirely. I am not the only one. Others will come. They already have. Born from the shimmer of eggs I guarded. Born to vanish just as I did. Born to carry forward what I never spoke. That is enough. In your world, love is a thing declared. It is shouted, proven, defended. In mine, love is quiet. It is the stillness after the storm, the weightless drift between breaths. It is watching something leave and never asking it to stay. I do not haunt the sea. I do not linger. I do not become myth or memory. But in the smallest tides, in the swirls of sand and salt, in the flicker of limbs behind a coral wall, I exist again and again and again. Not as a single being, but as a story, a rhythm, a soft voice that says, I was here. I gave what I had, and I let it go. This is the final truth. I was born to die after just one kiss. But that kiss, it held the whole ocean. It held me, and now I return to it. Not in body, but in meaning. Not in light, but in echo. Not to be remembered, but to become part of the sea forever.